I would now like to invite the last speaker of the day. This address will be refreshing and will keep you all glued to your seats. An entrepreneur, designer, TEDx speaker, author, Everester. He's the owner and founder of a sustainable home fashion brands, The Rug Republic and Sharda Exports. His journey of transforming a small business setup started by his parents in Meerut is turning it into a multi-hundred crore brand name is very inspiring. With environment and social responsibility in their DNA, their businesses support 5,000 families, and the Sharda Foundation actively contributes to philanthropic and social causes. He is an intrepid adventurer who set foot on the highest point on earth, the summit of Mount Everest, in 2019 at the age of 50. He also wrote a book called The 7 Lessons from Everest that shares precious lessons from the climb that apply both in business and in life. He's also raising money for CRY, Child Relief in You, while he has another book on managing small businesses underwriting. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Aditya Gupta.
So let's start this conversation by asking you, how many of us are planning to go climb the Everest? Four guys? Five? No, 6, 7. So what are the rest of you doing here? So I want to tell you that this conversation that we're about to start is not about mountaineering. It's not about climbing physical mountains. It is about the Everest that each one of you is actually already climbing. And you have varying degrees of success, I'm sure. And this conversation I want to run in a very simple format. Entertain you first with the story of Everest, Meri Aap Beeti. This is the cover page of my book, actually. And this photograph here is the last part of the Everest climb, which is still about 2 hours away to the summit. So this is a picture I took from what is called the South Summit. And after the conversation on the Everest climb itself, we will speak about what emerged as lessons to myself. These are things which I completely thought of after I was back from the Everest expedition. Because while you were there, you were in the middle of a lot of different very, very intense situations, mostly focused on staying alive. And it's not so much time to reflect and think of big, big ideas there. It's like next step, next day. But then when you are back, it keeps on playing in your mind. And then I first wrote an article. Then eventually COVID struck in 2020. So I climbed in 2019. And in 2020, I had all the time sitting at home to actually make a whole book out of it. And then I got motivated because we said, okay, we will raise money for CRY. We actually raised 80 lakhs for CRY through the book. The model was that somebody will donate to CRY and we will send the books out for free. So let's begin with the story part, and as we go along, I'll try and connect the story with the audience here. The Everest is a wonderful story. I have done it with business leaders, with students, with clubs, with all kinds of associations, and there is nobody who can say that, well, this is not for me. It is for everyone. So think of this as very clearly one thing very important. This is not a mountaineering conversation. I will not talk about the technicals of climbing mountains. This is about the metaphorical Everest that every single person here is already engaged with. And this organization, in fact, this whole conference, I am thankful. I mean, I just came here for the talk, and then Satish said, why don't you join us for 2 days? I said, yeah, well, I'm in Goa. Okay, I'll come and join. And I've thoroughly enjoyed myself since yesterday, enjoyed and felt inspired and felt like, this is something which is, so related to everyone, including me. So this organization, a lot of very smart people in the room today are already doing a lot of stuff which is no less than climbing Mount Everest itself, except that your climb is several decades long. So let's get started with the story, and then we'll keep talking about the rest of it. This is actually just, as I said, the slideshow. So we had some problems in there is an airport in a place called Lukla. So let me just check quickly. Any other people who've been up to at least base camp or something in the room? Nobody. Any trekkers otherwise, like trekking, a lot of adventure travel. So great. So you will connect to a lot of it. Anyway, so after Kathmandu, you have to fly to a place called Lukla, and from Lukla, actually, the trek starts. So there was a problem at the airport. We didn't want to wait around, waste time, so we just hired a chopper and we went. I was sitting next to the pilot, and as we were about to land in Lukla, I saw this air crash happen right in front of my eyes. The Lukla airport is considered to be one of the most dangerous airports in the world. There is one single runway, which is about 300 meters. So it slopes downwards, so when the planes take off, obviously the slope helps. And when the planes land, it's upwards, so the slope helps them to stop before they hit the actual mountain. But it's a very, very dicey space. Sare purane aircrafts. Everyone's comfortable with Hindi, because I'll mix and match between Hindi and English. Anybody who doesn't understand Hindi? Okay, then I'll go with I don't have a script. So I'm just talking. So all old aircrafts, crappy airlines, the planes are wobbly. They give you some sweets to sort of keep you preoccupied. It's about 45 minutes of a flight, but kind of scary. So anyway, I saw this, and then we got on with it. So I'll skip through the trekking part of it. This is Namche Bazaar, is one of the important stops on the way to base camp. It's also the last place, which kind of a town. It's very happening place. It actually has bars and cafes. So it comes after 3 days of walking. And here we spend an extra day for acclimatization, because especially if you're on a longer haul trip like a mountain climb, then at the lower altitudes, you really have to go slow, which is again counterintuitive. But if you think about it, and I encourage you to keep on drawing parallels with your own journey, whether it's professional, personal, challenges, whichever way you are facing, including personal life challenges, you will see that there are incredible parallels between all of those. So what I'm saying here is, when you are in it for the long haul, the earlier part of it, you really have to be very solid. So even at that 3,500 meter level, we're spending an extra day. If you're going only up to base camp, we don't need to spend. But if you're going to the top of Mount Everest, which is 9,000 meters virtually, so at 3,500, we spend an extra day. Because we are solidifying, we are making it very, very solid, the base of acclimatization. These are just some images from the trek, gives you the sense of it. Yaks are the primary mode of transportation after Lukla. So yaks are used to bring in stuff from Kathmandu. They are flown into Lukla. And the base camp itself is a very large, it's like a village of about 600 tents. And it's about 1.4 kilometers long. The trekking parties that go to base camp can only reach to the beginning part of base camp, and from there they have to turn around, and after that is the whole settlement of base camp. So this is actually an image of a puja which happens before the climbs actually start. So because the Sherpa community, is very religiously also aligned with Mount Everest, Sagarmatha, it's like taking permission from God to climb on God, because eventually what are you going to do? You're going to climb on a mountain which is also a God. And you're going to be living on it, dirtying it. So there is this sort of an, prayer for safety and an apology to say, okay, this is what we are doing. So it's typically a 2-3 hour, Tibetan lamas are called. The fun part of this is that the prasad is alcohol. So whiskey milta hai prasad. So, they throw around atta aise karte, little small holi with the atta, and then daru, whiskey, beer. So it's like a little party after the puja. And only after this puja does the actual climb beyond the base camp start. So my first attempt to climb Mount Everest was actually in 2014. And that year, when we did the puja and then the climb starts, the first night is mostly only the Sherpas go. That night, there was an avalanche on the Khumbu Icefall, and 16 Sherpas got killed on the very first night of the climb in 2014. And after that, Sherpas went on strike. We were camping there for 28 days trying to resolve the strike, but nothing. They were not budging at all. We all had to come back. So we prepared for a year. We went there. We camped, started. First night only, 16 Sherpas is a lot. And, I remember bodies being pulled out of the Khumbu Icefall, because helicopters have to hover around, and then they lower a rope, and they, somebody hooks something into a harness, and so the whole day the bodies are being pulled out, and 2 bodies could never be pulled out. So out of the 16, only 14 were pulled out the whole day. So it's quite a sight in terms of just, the reality of it. And then after 5 years, my Sherpa called me again, and he said, "Saab, chalo." I said, "Yaar, हाँ यार, अब 50 साल के हो गए." अरे नहीं साहब, आप तो चढ़ जाएगा, कुछ नहीं, हमें तो ऐसे ऐसे लोग चढ़ जाते हैं. I said, "चलो ठीक है फिर." he kind of pushed me. First, so I thought a client bana raha hai. But eventually, this was something embedded in my heart. So I gave it one more shot, and 2019, God was kind. So these are just some images from base camp. The formation. It's obviously a gorgeous place. It's kind of pleasant during the day, but the moment the sun goes behind the mountain in the evening, around 4:35, the temperatures drop to below -20 straight away. So it is a dramatic change within 30 minutes that, you can't be walking around just like that. I, anyway, was very used to these late night walks, so I was kind of okay. These are just some pictures of the. So this is our actual camp within the base camp. So we had a privately organized expedition. There were just 4 members, out of which 3 of us were sort of 50-year-olds. So these are our 3 tents, which we organized privately. We asked for larger tents where we could also stand, because in this tent we were spending like 35 days. So base camp remains your home for a long time during the expedition. The expedition itself for me was 52 days long from Delhi to Delhi, out of which about 35 to 40 days are just, going up and down through the base camp. So this was home for 30 days. I've said that. And then they start with some warm-ups, and you start some exercises, refresh your technical skills around climbing ice walls, handling the equipment, using crampons, getting used to the whole sort of vibe. This is base camp is 17,500 feet. So after that, and yesterday somebody was talking about when we had the conversation on disasters, and then Kamal mentioned that when it goes from 180 to 200, it's not 10% change. It is 10x, 100x change. It is exactly the same in altitude. After 16,000 feet, the graph goes exponential. So every 1,000 feet, the complexity of that, your body, what it has to endure, is not a linear relationship. So even climbing a 20,000-foot mountain like a Kilimanjaro sort of thing, the last night on Kilimanjaro gets quite challenging, even though it's Africa and it's not such a big deal. It's sort of a trekking peak. But anything beyond 17,000, 18,000 feet becomes, quite a different game. So this is actually a picture from one of the nearby mountains. The yellow things at the bottom, if you see, like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock position, can you see the little yellow specks? This is actually base camp. This whole thing is Everest base camp. It's like a village. The climbs that happen beyond base camp mostly start at night. So typically we leave around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning from base camp. The first night you go only up to camp 1, you camp there and you come back. This part, the Khumbu Icefall, which is the first part immediately as you leave base camp, is only about 1.4 kilometers from here to camp 1. And it is also the trickiest and the most dangerous part of the climb itself, right in the beginning. So it's baptism by fire in various ways, and you would see that people who are prepared for a year, even the cheap expeditions to climb Mount Everest cost between $40,000 and $50,000 per person. उतना पैसा दिया है, 1 साल से तैयारी कर रहा है, सालों से तैयारी कर रहा है. About 15% people leave the expedition the first time they go over this Khumbu Icefall. 1.4 kilometers, if you can finish this in about 10 hours, you've done very well. People do it in 16 hours, 14 hours. वो शेरपा थोड़ा उसको हड़काता है कि तुम कहाँ जाएगा, क्या करने आया इधर, शेरpas get quite tough with you sometimes. And the good guys, can also do it in 8 hours. Some of them, Sherpas can do it in 5, 6. So this is the Khumbu Icefall. It gives you a sense of, what it is. So Khumbu Icefall is really the trickiest part, and I'll share with you some videos on it too. But you can see what it looks like. So is this, yeah. So this is the video. Let's try to play it. So these are vertical ladders in some places and horizontal ladders in some other places. So this is with a rucksack, and you have a safety anchor. And this wall, when it ended, I remember specifically, there was another 2-3 meters kind of a steep slope on the top. And these 3 ladders, aluminum ladders, are basically just tied to each other by ropes. All of these ladders have to be monitored every single day because the ice fall is essentially a living, breathing organism. Every day there is sunlight, every day there is strong movement of what every block of ice is doing. So if you go to YouTube and you look up some videos, you will see these ladders coming off, people falling off the ladders. There is also another YouTube video called The Dark Side of Everest, where you talk about people dying on Everest and what all of those kind of things go on. These are the horizontal ladder crossings. So these crevasses right under it can be, 100 meters, can be whatever, and then the following is the next one. And it is very important when the first time you go through this ladder and you see through the ladder down into the crevasse below, obviously it takes, some sort of guts in your, steel in your guts to say, okay, we'll do this. And the trick is, and this trick I am going to correlate to a lot that happens in our lives, that you have to, one of the 7 lessons I've called is the power of focus. And what I meant by that, what I learned during Everest, there are a lot of places, I'll show you some more video, there's the path is barely 6 inches. And the steep fall on the right side can be a couple of 100 meters. Your focus has to be so strong on where you can actually step that you don't even see where you can fall. It's not important. पैर रखने का जगह है, आप बाकी जगह काहे को देख रहा है? You just see where you can step and you will pass through. But if you want to look at the left and the right and think about it for too long, you're dead. You will fall off, you will freeze, you will lose the balance. So that power of focus will come to you guys again and again. We were just having this conversation in the other room. So many things happen where there is very, very important to know what are you not going to think about and what are you not going to talk about, because this is just not the time for it. And if that is a skill that comes to you naturally, well, lucky you. If it is not, then you have to be conscious about it. Just some more images from the, So I've just written, these are some text from the book, and, I will pause for 10 seconds for you to read it, and I'll read it out to you. So, ladder crossings, and if somebody has seen those movies like Vertical Limit or Everest, how many people have seen the movie Everest and Vertical Limit, and you see how the ladder comes off and then this guy is dangling in the crevasse. So these are real things. It's not like, okay, movie mein to unhone shoot kiya, but such mein bhi hota hi hai. It's not like it's not such a thing. So many Hollywood movies have been shot and thriller scenes. So there is a safety anchor, and you must simply sharply focus on the next rung to place your boot on. Not look at the depths below, nor at the ends of the ladder, just one step at a time, and just focus there. And actually it's quite, every ladder crossing is barely 30, 40 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, not such a big deal. But it can look like a very big deal. This is actually a view of Camp 1. It's a gorgeous campsite, but a very dangerous campsite because it's laden with crevasses. So we're not supposed to roam around, but acha scenery hai, ghum rahe idhar udhar, nothing doing. You can only walk where there is already a track, and you will stay in your tents. And if you are even somebody going out to use a toilet or something to relieve themselves, there should be 2 or 3 people, because you can pretty much disappear in the middle of the ground at any place, especially if you're wandering around. So no wandering around. There is a lovely, so what happened with me, sorry, I missed telling that story. The previous night when we were climbing through the Khumbu ice fall, suddenly the whole of my right leg went through the ice into the waters below. So we were 4 of us going, and whole of leg, like I was on the ground with one leg disappeared into the ground, and my whole leg got completely soaked in water. Minus 25 temperature, of the air, not the water. 3 o'clock in the morning, we are halfway into the Khumbu ice fall. So the only choice I had was to turn around, come back alone, and the following day I went back alone with my Sherpa. So this is the following day when only me and my Sherpa went from other people went, they were okay. So those kind of things, suddenly some things can happen, and things can happen at different times. So you're landing and you see an air crash. You start, the first night you start the climbing on Mount Everest and your leg goes through and you're like soaked into the water, and you actually walk back with a soaked foot right inside your boots, 3 hours back to camp in minus 25. That's a highly risky situation for getting frostbites, because frostbites are essentially a burn caused by latent heat. So when water freezes next to your skin, it loses latent heat, it burns your skin out. So, so this was the story, and then we're sitting here, and an avalanche. Oops, sorry, I thought there was a video of the avalanche. But anyhow, so I have an actual live video of this avalanche, which maybe I missed putting in here. This is a gorgeous sunset on Camp 1. This is another video that will give you a sense of, the path. And this is just, so can you see where this guy is standing? And you can see the wall right below, and this is what I meant. These are places you cannot even stand on your 2 feet next to each other. So obviously the guy in front of me is my Sherpa, he makes it look very easy. This is me, my boot, because the camera is on my wrist. And then this thing ends into a ladder crossing. Icing on the cake on top of this, then you suddenly end up with a ladder. And these kind of paths you cannot cross if you start looking downwards into the fall zone. You can only cross it if you look only at the place where you can actually place your foot and nowhere else. That is the power of focus we need. It happens every day for a few times, but at that time if you are scared, then you're done. Which is what I said, the first time people go up to Camp 1, about 15 to 20% people go back home. Wapas jage, no, we don't want to do this, we are done. 20% of those people, of 335 odd people, 50, 60 people return. See, this is me. He obviously went very smoothly. I'm having a trouble transitioning onto the ladder, and I'm not so sure-footed as he is. I mean, the Sherpa is a totally different thing. Those are my feet happening over the crevasse on the aluminum ladder. And at the same time, I'm trying to make the video. Anyhow, so let's keep going. This is Camp 2, 21,000 feet. Beautiful camp. I don't mind. I mean, this is an easy chat. Din khatam ho chuka. We'll have fun. Let's talk. I mean, I'm good. I'm not interrupted. Go ahead. I'm sorry, the Kumbu ice falls 6 times, yeah. Because you have to do the acclimatization, so you can't go just one time. So every time you leave base camp, you first have to deal with Kumbu ice fall. So the first time you go up to Camp 1 and then you go back to base camp. Then the next time you go up to Camp 2 and then you go back to base camp. Then the third time you go typically up to Camp 2.5, 3 and then finally you go to the summit and then you come back. Yeah, so every time you go, stay one night. So first time you go, stay Camp 1 and then spend a night, acclimatize, go back. So it's basically the walk high, sleep low thing. And then after some acclimatization, you go sleep one night at Camp 1, 20,000 feet. Then you go all the way back to base camp, 17,500 feet. Then you stay there for 2-3 days. You do the little hikes and, sort of recuperate, eat well. Then the next time you go, then you spend one night at Camp 1, one night at Camp 2. Then you go all the way back to base camp. So that's the reason it takes so many days. I mean, it's not that you are climbing non-stop in one direction for 50 days. But if you see, if you draw the parallel here, this is how all of our lives, all the large projects, it's not a unidirectional, one-sided move, chad gaye upar ek hafta mein. For the last climb when we do what is called the summit push. So you get ready and then the last time you climb to the top, it's only 5 days to the top. But to get to those 5 days, you've already spent 40 days. And this is exactly what happens to us. Like these projects that we're talking about here happens a lot, something goes wrong, or you have to be prepared for that up and down, and then finally at one point you will go ahead, and sort of, take it with you. So this is a very interesting picture. As you leave Camp 2, then there is one more step change in the complexity and the demands of the expedition. So this is a ice wall about 1,200 feet vertical up. It's called the Lhotse face. And in this picture, if you see 3 o'clock position, that little black small patch, that is actually Camp 2. So you walk through, and if you see where this person is, and I've taken the picture because I've already finished the climb up to the top, and then you can see straight down how small these people are, and these are just coming up to camp. Camp 3 is a very dangerous camp. It's really perched on the side of the mountain. There's not even a flat place to actually pitch a tent. So you remove some ice and you make a small flat place to actually pitch a tent. You don't want to hang in there for too long. So typically we reach there in the afternoon and रात को 3 बजे उधर से निकलने का है. If you reach there 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 10-12 घंटा रुको, या आगे जाओ या पीछे जाओ. Don't hang in there. It's a very dangerous, very. See, this is the camp, so-called camp. So you see all these little ice boulders. These are basically removed from the face, and these are ice. This is not snow. This is blue ice. Blue ice is permanent ice cap. This is very, very hard ice. Even when we want to actually dig in our crampons, we have to sometimes hit it. Actually, you can, dim the lights. It'll show up better. There's a lot of light coming to. I didn't think of it earlier. I should have, but let's do it now. We don't need this lighting on the stage. They don't need to see me. They need to see this. Yeah, this very strong floodlights, coming up. Yeah, remove it. Just, yeah, much better. I think you will see the whole thing much better now. So this is Camp 3, 24,000 feet. The most treacherous of all camps on Everest, perched into digs made into the steep Lhotse face, and the camp altitude varies by about 600 to 800 feet, depending on where your tent is perched. Perched, not pitched. The climb from C2 is a straight vertical Lhotse face after a gentle slope at the edge of the mountains. This is where you better be on the, anyway, this is just a part of the thing. This is possibly a video here, yeah.
Okay.
So this is a video of
Camp 3 sunset. We left in the morning.
So we come through this big river of ice, and then we are here.
To get here. Steep vertical Lhotse face. And then
That's our tent.
our tents. That's Everest.
And that's Mount Everest.
Nearby now.
So now you're getting very, very close to Everest. It's like 2 days away. And you can see that this face of Everest is actually black rock. It's called the Everest Massif. The west face of Everest has so much wind that snow and ice can't even sort of stick there.
How beautiful is this?
Plus it has obviously the sun. So it's very surprising and counterintuitive that how come there is no ice on this whole thing. But there is no ice. And I'll show you some more pictures of it. So here you can see how where the tents are perched, and then you don't see anything because the whole thing is vertical drop straight below. And then the flat ground starts again, which is a gentle slope up to Camp 2, which is 3 o'clock position in this picture. So this is upwards from Camp 3 towards Camp 4. This yellow part, that you see the little yellow rocks that you can see here, it's called the yellow band. So the earlier part is called the Geneva Spur, and then this one's called the yellow band. This kind of things give us some challenges because, are you familiar with crampons, those iron spikes that are under the mountaineering boots? They help a lot on snow and ice. But when there is rock, in which obviously the spikes are not going to go in, and there is no opportunity to keep on taking them off and putting them on, so we actually have to go over the rocks with the spikes only. So the hands have to be holding onto the rope very, very strongly because some or 2 or 3 times तो skid होगा ही होगा उसमें आपका पैर. And you can't just fly off with gravity because your legs, sort of gave in. And it's so cold you can't take off your, gloves to try and open the spike. There's no place to actually sit or wait or, change all those things. So all of these things, when you start drawing parallels to what you guys are doing in life, there is not always going to be everything that can be done in the sitting in a drawing room. We can say, "Arey yaar, spikes nikal ke chad jao fir dobara." Wahan pe in the middle of it, you can't do those things. In the middle of your project, there are many opportunities where you have to so-called wing it. It's 2 days, 3 days. You have a meeting, you have some other problem. So it is not always going to go as per, a situation that you would ideally like. This is a lovely shot that I got. So this on the left is Mount Everest, the summit. Now we are as close to it as the one last day between us and the summit. And if you see this whole thing flying off the peak is called the plume. And this is typically the indication of the wind speeds, because these are not just clouds. This is the snow flying off the face of Mount Everest. So when you're approaching this, and I ran out of oxygen just around this point, there might be a picture. So suddenly I was climbing, and then I am like, it becomes so difficult for me to take even one step. I was okay till 5 minutes ago, and then I pulled up my pressure gauge and no more oxygen in the tank, which was my mistake, because the previous day I had an oxygen leak, and we fixed it, but we didn't plan that this means that some point ahead, oxygen might run out before you actually reach camp. Good part that I was only 45 minutes away from Camp 4. So I tried to walk, I couldn't. Then somebody said, why don't you wait? We'll get some Sherpas to send it back. The day was fine, the weather was okay. I just sat in there about an hour. But of course, it's cold. So sitting around in the cold is not that simple. But still, anyway, so those things keep on happening, your legs go down, something else happens, an avalanche happens. But these kind of things keep on happening in our regular lives too, in so many other ways. Okay, they are not always life-threatening, but they're at least project-threatening. They're at least, your goal-threatening. So this is a wonderful picture. It gives you the scale of it. And one of my lessons from the Everest climb is what I call that scale should not scare you. This is a picture. I'll take the opportunity to explain what I mean. Look at this photograph. Now, from where this guy is, just around the bend is basically Camp 4. So this whole thing that you see now has to be done on the last night, up and then back on the same day. So this much is left for the last part of the climb. So the first time you see Mount Everest on the trek is just ahead of Namche Bazaar 45 days ago. And then it looks like a little sort of, pyramid in the sky somewhere. And then after the next 40 days, you're walking. This is basically now you're at the cruising altitude of jumbo jets, 30,000 feet. And now you're there on the last day, and it's still in your face. It is intimidating, to say the least. This little bump that you see at the bottom, 6 o'clock position, can you see that? It's about 80 feet. It's a small vertical ice wall that you have to climb right in the beginning. This one. Just this much is 80 feet. The last night of the climb is about 1,000 meters. It's about 3,000 feet climbing up and then coming back. No, keep the lights low, yeah. I'm sorry? Yeah, whichever. It just helps to see better. Anyhow, so this is that lesson about the scale should not, and whatever we are trying to do here, this conference, you have monumental goals. And the scale of those goals cannot be scaring us, it can only be inspiring us. And Mount Everest brings that alive. As I told you, the first time people go over camp 2, 15% people leave. After that also, during the whole expedition, dhire people quit or fall sick, or for whatever reason, they begin to sort of lose hope or lose the energy and the will to keep on fighting that battle, because it's a it's the toughest endurance test that one can think of. And one more interesting thing that I'll share with you as a personal anecdote. So when you reach there to base camp, there's like the whole global community of climbers is there, and many other people are there, and they're very, sort of fit-looking people, marathoners, bodybuilders. They are सब बड़े साले गोरे, 6.25 foot के and solid guys, and you feel like, यार boss, like, हम तो कुछ भी नहीं है. ये लोग आए एवरेस्ट चढ़ने, तुम क्या करने आए इधर? But the fun part, a lot of those people don't make it. And ordinary fellows like me make it. It's not only me, others too. And the reason I analyzed was that there is a sense of humility. Also, there is a sense of expectation of trouble. We are expecting to be having a very hard time on the mountain. So when those hard times show up, we know it hona hi tha. It's okay, we'll carry on. Let's carry on. And that is one part, one of those lessons says, expect to deal with the unexpected. But when there is arrogance in face of those in face of a mountain, or if there is arrogance in face of your, massive goals or important goals, and then the mountain shows its colors, then those fellows who have been thumping their chest, they don't know where to look because they feel there is a loss of faith. Then we begin to make excuses. Yaar, ye Sherpa अच्छा नहीं है, equipment अच्छा नहीं है, खाना अच्छा नहीं है, मौसम अच्छा नहीं है, भगवान में problem है. So they want to exit. I have seen people exiting even from Camp 3. It's only a day and a half, but inside their hearts, they just feel होगा नहीं, और वहाँ पे जाके हम ये prove नहीं करना चाहते हैं कि होगा नहीं. Whereas folks like us, पहले ही पता ही था कि बैंड बजना है हमारा, तो चलते रहते. And eventually, we sort of made it, man. So this is a beautiful photograph. This is the final camp. It's called the South Call. It's Camp 4. It's also the official start of the so-called death zone. It's 8,000 meters. So as we all know that there are only 14 peaks which are higher than 8,000 meters. So in fact, on the whole of the planet, where you are camping for a night, there are only 14 more mountains left which are even higher than this. So on Everest, it is still a camp, but you are now higher than 99.9% mountains in the world already. Something more happened when we reached here. And these are, again, I'm asking you to draw parallels to your own journeys. So the night we reached here, so typically when you leave Camp 3, and I showed you the picture, and I've skipped the picture with the missing oxygen, etc., but that happened. When you reach here in the late afternoon, by this time there is a lot of anxiety. There is no sleep or appetite to eat. Altitude really does a lot of things to your body. And it is basically a state of flow. Like you just have to keep going and the body is essentially eating itself. You can barely eat a bowl of noodles or maybe some soup and some nuts, kuch kha liya. You can't, your stomach doesn't just take anything. So that night we're supposed to climb up, and in the evening about 6:30, a massive storm hits Camp 4. Massive. I was thinking this tent is going to fly off with us 6 people inside today. Because this Camp 4 is actually between 2 big mountains. So there's Lhotse, which is the 4th highest mountain in the world, and Everest. And right in the middle of that shoulder, that call is called the South Call. So massive storm, and we have to take a call that we cannot go up tonight, because there is no way in this storm we'll be able to make it, plus it's extremely dangerous. A lot of people on that night, for them it was the end of their expedition because they don't have oxygen at this point to stay here an extra night and then try and go the next day. So if you can't go tonight, tomorrow morning though, you have to go back only because there is no oxygen. We had, on the other hand, with our customized planning, we had taken extra oxygen. So we had actually 3 cylinders per person of extra oxygen, out of which 2 were made available to us because of our planning at this point. So in spite of all of that, whereas 95% of the people, it was over, for us, we had the opportunity, at least from the perspective of oxygen supply, that we could actually hang in here for an extra 24 hours in the death zone, which is highly not recommended at all. Because now you're in a place that you're supposed to just get out of here. You shouldn't be there in the first place as human beings. But charna to hai hai. So anyway, we had the oxygen and we just hung in there, huddled inside a tent from this evening till the next evening. The whole day, 24 hours just inside the tent. And this night, our main guide disappeared. So when we sort of were ready to go the next day, our main guide is missing. And what he has done is basically taken money from somebody else and he's tried to take somebody else up the previous night only. And that somebody else was actually one of our 4 people only. It was somebody from America. Bad story, but anyhow. So he kind of bribed another $10,000 to this guide because he was already suffering. And he knew that kal tak last nahi karega, yahan se nikalne ka. So the following day, when we are ready to leave in the afternoon, there is no main guide. So talk about unexpected problems. Legs going through, oxygen going, running out, and then on the final night of the climb, main guide missing. Anyhow, we have to go. So about 5:30 in the evening, we started climbing to the top. The weather was very nice. And it took me, so this is the climb that, happens through the night. So 5:30 in the evening, we left Camp 4 and, I'm sorry? Without the main guide. So there is a main guide and there is a personal Sherpa. So we had the personal Sherpas, but the senior person who had actually climbed Everest 7 times before, which was the reason he was hired and he was paying tens of thousands of dollars. But anyway, so that chap was missing. Lovely photograph. I call it the most difficult to see sunrise in the world. It's nearly from the top of the world. So the sun actually rises over the Tibetan plateau. I want to share something here about these long-term, longish expeditions. You know, I probably am not keeping to time, but let's just enjoy the trip. I realized, especially on this expedition, and you see if you will draw a parallel in your minds, the 40 to 80% stage of a long-term project, of a challenging goal, becomes very, very difficult. So initially, there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of energy, and you say, and all of those things. And you reach about 40%, which in this case is, let's say, somewhere around camp 2, 2.5. And then you realize that, boss, I am finished already. And I'm only 40%, like this mountain is still there. How will I ever do this? You know? All the projects I have seen, even in my business, other time, there are always those phases which happen somewhere just before half-point mark, where you feel that you're already a spent force. And there is way too much of work still left. There's way too much of, complications still left to resolve. And that is the time, I think, where you put your chin up and you completely stop thinking about kitna bacha hai, kitna. Every time you're thinking how much more is left, how much did I cover, just cut that thing out and go step by step, one step at a time, one step at a time. Just the whole night, the last night, I was just counting. It takes a lot of time. Every step, I have to take 5 deep breaths. And I was doing that on a count for 13 hours. And you realize that after a certain number of hours or days or months, as the case may be, depending on the project, excuse me, when you reach around the 80% mark of the same expedition, suddenly a lot of energy comes back. Because now you are tasting victory is imminent. The mind plays so many games on us, it is just not funny. It's completely, if someone as unfit as me can reach the summit of Mount Everest, anybody can do anything. It's all here. I'm not somebody who's physically, marathon I can't run, I know. I've never even tried. But this one I climbed. So that thing, so the reason I mentioned this now, when you're going through the night, the sun rays, that first time the sun shows up, you're kind of nearing the summit and the sun comes up. And all the mountain climbs typically happen at night, and every time I've seen it, that when the sunrise actually hits and the sun rays come in, it's not like it becomes warm or something, but suddenly it just energizes you in a very different way. It feels like, we'll do it, we're almost done, we can get it done. So those kind of signs we have to see in our projects, in our challenges in life, that there will always be phases where it seems very, very difficult, it seems very challenging, it feels like, yaar, kya kar rahe hain, hona to hai nahi, why are we even bothered about this? It's not going to happen. That is exactly the time when you stop evaluating. And a bigger picture has to be in your mind that we will do this, we can do this, and we're not going to keep thinking about how much is left. And after a little bit of time, you suddenly see that the whole picture completely changes because you didn't give up at the time when every ounce of your body was telling you to just go back home. You will die. See, so many people left. This fellow died. So 12 people died the year I climbed on Everest. And all of these things are very well known. Dead bodies hote hain. Purane dead bodies bhi pade hain Everest mein. Some of them are also used as milestones. So there is a body called green boots. Oh, green boots, which is basically the guy is wearing green boots, and it's such that, obviously they put the bodies at least orient so that you can't see faces and things, but you see the body, you see the, their clothing. These are just some nice pictures of the sunrise. So this is now, because I just a few slides, not the whole book. So I want you to read this. I'll stop talking. You just read this for a second, because this is the very, very intense internal feeling that I've described in this. Can everybody read, or should I read it out for the people at the end? So let me try to read it out. Does not matter if you are totally exhausted, dehydrated, freezing, hypoxic. Hypoxic is shortage of oxygen in your blood. hungry, you're not eating anything for 24 hours straight, we were like, or anything worse, you must remain super alert and in top performance mode, or you will pay. You will pay with your life. That's the deal. Take it or it will take you. That's what you sign up for when you sign up for a shot at placing foot on the top of this world. This is pretty much the last hurdle of a patch before you kiss the summit. It reveals itself all of a sudden after the South Summit, and one look at it sends a sharp shiver down your spine before you piece your courage back together and fight on. Look at the people. The path is nothing more than a few inches wide, and you've been already going for 12 hours. So this is basically when you're climbing the thing. So there is a spot called the South Summit. So we're climbing from the south side. So because you're under it, it is like a false summit. We know that it's a false summit. It's not that we don't know. It's not a surprise. But still, all of these sort of points where you are already kind of fighting that battle, and the visible top, you reach this, and then this whole part suddenly becomes visible. Before that, all of this is not visible. So draw the parallel in your projects. You were thinking, because you see, Everest is a very well documented journey. So we know ये South Summit है, ये अभी ऐसा आएगा, अभी वैसा आएगा. But many of the things that you guys are doing, it's actually not documented. Nobody's done it before. So that's why many people think, and it's probably not wrong, that Everest is an easier climb than many other unclimbed mountains, because it's very well documented. We know exactly what to expect. We know the dangers. We know so many other troubles. So yes, we have to go through the trip, but we still know it. But in your case, you don't even know what you're headed for. So suddenly the South Summit, I'm wondering how the first timers would have felt. They might have thought this is the summit, but it is actually a false summit. And this is a very tricky, because imagine you've already been going through the night for 12 hours. There are timestamps on my picture. This is already about 5:30 in the morning, and we left at 5:30 in the evening. Through minus 35, no stopping, no nothing to eat, nothing to do. It's just like you have some nuts and some chocolate, because how will you eat? Your hands are already under the mittens. Even to take these pictures, I had to take my hands out of the mittens, quickly take a photograph, put the thing back, put the camera back, like the phone back into my body. So these were very, very interesting and very, very challenging. So, and this one, if you can see this part here, you see there are people who are sort of collected in that spot. That is actually called the Hillary Step. यहाँ पे एक stop, there is an overhanging rock. So here, while you're going through the ropes, this is a spot where definitely there will always be a slowdown, because very many people will have a very hard time, including people like me, to go over the rock. So therefore, there's always a little bit of a cluster of people there. So it becomes also a very dangerous spot, because if there is a movement of ice or a rock or something, a lot of people can fall off. So anyhow, but we know that this is going to come, so it happens. This is already, I am now already at the summit actually. This is a picture I've taken from the summit. The last few people are coming. So after the Hillary Step, it's a gentle slope about 50 meters. And then after the Hillary Step, you say, now to ab to ho hi gaya. That excitement inside your thing is coming in, and you're completely not tired anymore, and you're very excited about just reaching the top. So this is me on the summit of Mount Everest. And I want to say the same thing to you. My goal was to prove to myself what ordinary people like me can do with preparation and passion. I am no fitness freak or a sportsman, etc. Genuinely ordinary chap and a mountain lover. I made it, so that really means that most people can. Go for your Everest, my friends, whatever that happens to be. There ain't no mountain so high that you cannot reach. And this is my main message through these talks, that it is not about who you are, it's about what you're willing to do with whoever you are, So this is actually a Mount Everest summit 360-degree view video.
Stop.
So I had to obviously conserve the batteries. I had only one little phone, so I had to be very economical about making sure that battery is left. So just chota videos. I made one quick video for my family, a message for them, and 1/3. So 2 13, 15-second videos, and that's it. on the way, you can see on the left side, the clouds are already coming in. Another 15 minutes or so, we had complete blizzard conditions, complete whiteout, very little visibility. And most of our return was under blizzard conditions. For the next 6-7 hours, visibility was a few meters, just a few meters. So here is a very beautiful, clear view from the summit. So, that way, think about it, how lucky I can consider myself, because people may reach the summit, and people who would have reached 20 minutes later than when I reached, they would have seen nothing. And that happens in life too. I mean, you've done everything, now you also reach the summit, finally you are safe. But that view is a big part of what you're there for, that feeling of, seeing this and almost seeing the curvature of the planet. Because there is no other point that you can actually physically be present and see, the Mother Earth, which is higher than this. So this is interesting. So this is Camp 4 at the bottom. This is what I said. The mountain in front of me is Mount Lhotse. It's the 4th highest mountain in the world, 8,600 meters. I'm coming down from Everest. And this is the part, where, and that's why it's so strong winds, because it's between two massive mountains. So the venturi that gets formed by all the wind passing through, it can't go through the two mountains. So everything goes through this one only. It's a very, very tricky spot. This was the point where my personal Sherpa also left me. So this is about midday, 12 o'clock. You can see it's a vertical drop. And at the end, as I was sharing with you, when there's a rock face, it becomes harder to climb down with the crampons. So after this was a vertical drop of a black rock face. So it was getting a little bit of a jam situation. And my Sherpa said, let me just go and see what's happening, because we were sitting there for about 45 minutes. And he went and he never came back. He just walked off. So the last 6 hours, after having already been dealing with it for the last 18 hours, last 6 hours just came on my own. I have last half bottle of oxygen left, and no more Sherpa, no nothing. वो बंदा तो चला ही गया वो. अगले दिन मुझे मिला. And you can't do anything. You are exhausted. You're very vulnerable out there. So this is probably a video. So this is a video of that spot. You can see how it's a complete vertical drop, and I'm just perched there. I didn't want to go and stand right in front of the line, so I just held back myself, a couple of meters away. And these are the people behind me who are also sitting and waiting, and it's snowing already. And this Sherpa fellow went and see कि मैं देख के आता हूँ क्या problem है. And then because these people can obviously walk much better than most of the other people, so he just went on the side and then he just walked off because he was also kind of exhausted. Anyway, so this is the final thing when I got back finally at Camp 2. This is after so that night we went to Camp 4, and then this is the following day. So this is like the whole another day of descent. And this is that picture. This is my picture back in Kathmandu. My wife and my daughter came to receive me in Kathmandu. This is how I looked when I just got back from the summit of Mount Everest. This is my mom welcoming me back home in Delhi. Obviously, your parents are on their edge. Everybody's on their edge. The last day, when I left for the summit at about 5:30, I called home. We had satellite phones, but again, battery problem. So we have to conserve. I just said we're leaving now. And for the next 28 hours, they didn't hear from you. Only the following day at 8:30 p.m., I called them again. I'm back, I did it, and I'm completely safe. It is not even possible for us to imagine what those families are going through. In many ways, they're having a harder time than we are having. Because they're just sitting helplessly somewhere in front of a mandir or something. They can't sleep, obviously. So now, the journey part is over, and we can take a pause, and I want to talk about why all of these lessons emerge from that journey. So the reason we go through the expedition slides is that you understand why these kind of things become important in a context of a climb like Mount Everest. So the first lesson, which I thought was most important, is passion plus preparation is equal to performance. And this I want to say very, very strongly, especially to this audience, because there are a lot of very passionate people sitting here about the cause that we're trying to deal with. We also meet a lot of passionate people otherwise, but a lot of those people are not demonstrating any sacrifices that they are willing to make for that passion. So I give this example that passion for If you are very passionate about watching the cricket matches in the ICC World Cup, that is really passion about watching cricket and having a good time watching cricket. That is not passion about cricket. Because passion about cricket means field में जाके पूरा दिन खेलने का धूप में. Preparation part is important because that preparation is the thing that is genuinely giving you the confidence inside. The optimism that you need to go through these very difficult patches is possible only when you know in your heart that your preparation is robust. So the passion helps you to prepare. The preparation works it out when you are there, when in the middle of the problems, there is that passion to reach, and obviously the preparation that inside you. So it went. So therefore we see that, people are passionate, but they're not doing much about it. Without preparation and sacrifice, passion doesn't yield anything. When preparing or going becomes tough, our passion can push us through. Otherwise, we may give up easily. So it takes both passion and preparation for any of the mega projects. That was my first learning. And you will see it when you start mapping any problems on it. This one is very, very often missing, either of the two or both. The next one, as I already spoke about, since we've already spent time, our actions depend on our focus. So both negatives and positives are always present. Where we choose to focus determines how we act. So this becomes very obvious on the ladder crossings, but the whole expedition itself is a matter of focus. Because you can always get very, very scared. You can always get very, very hassled with so many things. There are very delicate and dangerous phases where danger lurks everywhere except the few inches that you can actually step on. So if our focus is sharp enough to see only the safe spot and ignore the rest, we can move onwards. Otherwise, we will freeze or fall. The power of our focus can lead us out of most difficult circumstances. This is my first-hand learning, not only from the mountain, but also phases of projects in business, in other things. Whether it's building, it's private work, anything. Scale need not scare you, I already talked about it. This is actually a picture of Mount Everest from Camp 3. So this is the part that now remains just for the last day and a half. 45 days you've been climbing, last day aa gaya, abhi bhi itna bacha hai. And now you're completely a spent force. Completely, the last 3 days you're barely sleeping, you're barely eating, and this is still left. So when facing a massive and complex task like Everest, one can't afford to be afraid of scale. This positive mindset is crucial at the beginning of the project and all the way through to the end. The scale should enthuse you, not deter you. Obviously, no guts, no glory, but it's a matter of guts, even your other projects. It's not only about, This one we talked about, look at this image. This is pretty much the sort of an enlargement of the same image that I showed you earlier. You can see it's a vertical face. This is the last part of the Everest. On the very top, you can't see the summit, but you can see that flat part that I talked about. And then the cluster of people on the Khumbu ice fall. One step at a time is the most obvious thing. We all know about one step at a time. And that's what I said, when that 40 to 80% situation, so many other times, there is no other formula that is required except having the unshakable belief that it's a question of one step at a time. That belief system cannot be put to test every 5 minutes. It's an adopted thing. It's a part of your bloodstream that I will just do it, and a big task seems difficult. And we talked about what we were talking an hour ago in the room. A big task seems difficult until you break it down into smaller steps. Once the steps are decided, one needs to keep putting one step ahead of the other. You can walk, run, or crawl, but you need to keep moving forward. That alone can lead to success. And this happens across the board. This is not only a mountain climbing thing. This is actually me sitting without the oxygen. So lesson 5, I already gave you the examples. Expect the unexpected. The idea here was basically that no matter how robust our preparation is, there will still be unexpected things that will go wrong. And the lesson to say that we are expecting to deal with the unexpected parts is that when those things will happen, so broadly speaking, there are 2 lessons, okay? So there is this one, which is make friends with fear, and then there is this one. So it is about risk management, okay? All your work, all our life is about pursuit of pleasure, avoidance of risk. These are the only 2 things that we do in our lives. So risks are two parts, known risk, unknown risks. So the unknown risk I am classifying under this lesson, and the known risk I am classifying under this lesson, which I am calling make friends with fear. What do I mean by making friends with fear? So when a friend, who's a friend? Somebody we are comfortable spending time with. Somebody we're not trying to avoid. We acknowledge his presence and we are fine with him visiting us, meeting us. The known risks have to be accepted, and if the risks and if those fears are helping us to be very robust in our preparation, then it's a very healthy thing to have. Fears are a healthy thing to have. I am not going to sit here and say, oh, I'm not afraid of Mount Everest. You have to be lying or you have to be stupid, or both. So the fear, and then what do you do with that fear? How do you deal with that fear? Making friends with it really means there is no such thing as not being scared. What is realistically a threat? So the threats cannot be ignored or wished away. They have to be accepted, prepared for, and actions taken as required. So I gave you the example of the oxygen tanks. So this is a very well-known risk that you can run out of oxygen. I was taking very specific steps to not fall into the frost bites. I had consulted mountaineers. I was taking specific steps. On Mount Everest, I can give you a very simple statistic. Out of 25 people who are climbing, one guy, at least one will not even come back home from every 25 which are there, and we already know it. Another 5, 6 will have a massive injury, loss of limb, fingers, hand, nose, whatever. Another 5 to 10 will have injuries which will take a couple of weeks, frost bites, cheeks, things, but they have not lost a limb, but they still need a few. Only the last 10 or so out of 25 will really come back unscathed. And I was fortunate to be one of those 10. And it was obviously good fortune and so many other things, but there is also these factors that go into it. So making friends with what, and this is a good shot of that same spot. In this shot, on the left side, top left, around 10 o'clock position is that ladder that we were seeing, that video that I played. So if you see the whole scale of this wall, this is what it is, by the way. So how can you not be afraid of climbing these things out there in minus 25 degrees at night? And then coming back, rappelling on these, things. So this one, expect the unexpected, is essentially the thought here, and I want to very, very strongly emphasize on this in the context of what you're doing. We have to be able to expect that things will go wrong in the most unexpected way, and that is to be expected. We don't know what will go wrong, so we can't be prepared for the specific disaster, but we can be prepared enough that we will not panic when things will happen. We will not start blame games, we will not start panicking, we will focus all our energy on fighting the problem and nothing else. Because on Mount Everest, there's no time to waste. Your thing is running off, in a couple of hours, here or there, you can may completely perished. So that thing about how you deal with the risks between these two parts, I think is pretty easy to understand. The last and final lesson, and the most important lesson, time is oxygen. And this one I added because a lot of our talks happened and then people said, oh, what's your message for the youngsters? It's not only a message for the youngsters. So I told you how oxygen is a limited resource on Everest. Everybody goes with a certain number of oxygen cylinders. And once you are beginning to use oxygen cylinders, oxygen तो चल रहा है. आप चलो कि नहीं चलो, आपका तो सांस लेने के लिए oxygen लग रहा है. So if you are not going to be pacing yourself that the mountain will run out before your oxygen runs out, obviously, I probably would not be delivering this talk here. So there is a fixed amount of oxygen every climber has on Everest. Once we are above 8,000 meters in the death zone, even if we are not moving, oxygen is running. We need to keep going and reach camp before oxygen runs out. In life, the clock is ticking regardless of what we are doing. Time in life is like oxygen on Everest. We have a fixed amount and it keeps moving even if we are not. And this is again applicable in the scale of hours sometimes, weeks sometimes, months sometimes, years sometimes. The unit of time can change, but the concept doesn't change. So that idea of having a fixed resource, which we lose sight of very often. Because typically we don't get the helicopter view of life till we are 55 years old like I am. And then it's too late because life is already kind of finished. So if we can be very conscious of it, especially I was told student, I don't know if there are enough students, but whoever there are, but I'm sure there are people who are less than at least 40 years old, if not 30. So this is a thing which you have to be very conscious of. It's a very serious matter. That's it. This is probably the last slide. I'm just using some important quotes. On the top is Sir Edmund Hillary, which is what you experience there, which is what gives you the gyan that I am sharing with you today, to push oneself voluntarily, of course, to within a wisp of death and then return to the valley in the world below is to see life in its raw immediacy. Basically, it is that intimate connection with your mortality, which can happen only when you know for days after days after days that this can genuinely be your last day. And there are other people, there are so many other stories I couldn't tell because already I've exceeded the time. And the last line, most important, most relevant to the crowd here, usually we think that brave people have no fear. The truth is that they are intimate with fear. There is no such thing as no fear. That's bullshit. Thank you, guys. Thank you. That was a very resounding round of applause for me. I appreciate it. But let me know if you have thoughts or ideas. And, I know some people are in a rush. Whoever wants to leave can leave. I am not in a rush to leave. And we are all in a resident campus, so it's fine. But I think the most important part of this conversation should be to connect the dots with what you guys are trying to do here. And that is probably the reason why, Satish thought that, we should do this talk here, because what you're doing really is nothing easier than climbing Everest itself. Any thoughts, questions, ideas? Don't ask me how did you use the toilet, because that keeps up coming all the time. Invariably people, यार टॉयलेट का कैसे होता है उधर यार? अरे बाबा एवरेस्ट चढ़ने गए हो तो मैं टॉयलेट की परवाह है. हो जाता है जब आता है. No. So basically, see, it's a very elaborate logistics affair, which is partly the reason why it's so expensive. So there are the agencies, there are Sherpas who are doing it. We are barely about to carry ourselves to the top. उसके ऊपर से टेंट लगाने को बोलेगा तो अभी.
And what goes on in your mind when you're sitting there waiting for the 24 hours, when you said in Camp 4 you had to wait?
See, obviously there is a whole list of, sort of random thoughts which are of all kinds, positive, negative, risk perception and so on. It's very hard to document every step. A lot of it is also the riffraff, the little stuff that is happening. मेरा oxygen का pipe निकल गया, मेरा पैर ठंडा हो रहा है, ये उधर है, वो उधर है. But other than that, it is mostly a very fine line between, determination to climb, and the deaths that happen are also the reason is that people don't turn around at the right time. So to be able to understand what is the time to cut your losses and what is the time to fight on is a judgment call, really a judgment call. So that conversation keeps on happening with yourself. क्या करना है, चलना है कि वापस जाना है, चलना है कि वापस जाना है. But then you are there, वापस जाना is also not really all that safe. So it is what it is.
Very inspiring. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Sudha. Yeah, sure.
Was coming down equally challenging as compared to going up?
No, actually, you know what? Coming down is actually a lot more of a challenge. I'll give you two reasons for it. One is that obviously you've been going for that many number of hours and days, and that energy and that enthusiasm and that sort of adrenaline of making it to the summit is already finished. So now you're just sort of going back home. Match to ho gaya abhi. The other reason is that, when you're going up, the equipment, because people are not familiar with the equipment. So when we are climbing, it's called the ascender, it's called the Jumar. So it's on a rope, it has a sprocket wheel. So you You push your hand through over the rope and the sprocket wheel goes up only in one direction, and then you hold it, then it holds there, and then you can sort of, pull yourself up or step up. On the way down, there is no braking mechanism. And many places there can be things which are 3 feet, 4 feet single step. So you are now going for that many number of hours, and now gravity is pulling you downwards, and the only thing that is holding you is you're tightly holding onto that rope, and your muscles are really finished because you've been eating on your muscles only for the last so many days. So on the way back, sometimes most of the deaths also occur mostly on the way back, and everybody's aware of this, so there is already a mental pressure of that thing. But the equipment is such that the good thing is that you're not losing breath so much. So it's not like every one step you're taking 5 deep breaths. You can take 5, 10, 15 steps at a time. But the bad thing is that the gravity is now pulling you downwards, and you have to keep braking yourself just by, the power of your legs or the power of your arms, or both at many times, especially when there are these steep drops. Because then it's very steep, then you're rappelling. But most of the time it's neither rappelling steep nor easy walk, so it's a little bit in the middle, so it gets very, very exhausting, and therefore it gets very tricky. How much time did it take you to get back? So we took 13 hours to the top, 11 hours back. I took. People can be faster than that. So I was 24 hours non-stop on my feet, Camp 4 to Camp 4, 5:30 to 5:30 the next day.
Yeah, I had a question. I mean, apart from being an Everester, you run a successful business as well. So some of the lessons that you showed, any examples from your professional life where the learnings and the lessons have helped you in your running your organization or in the critical junctures?
See, very relevant question. And again, I'll relate to not just my business, but everybody who's sitting here, they're doing their own things. So let's talk about, one by one. So expect the unexpected, things happen. Clients go bankrupt. Like in my business, massive clients have gotten bankrupt all of a sudden. On the one hand, they were 20% of your business. On the other hand, they also owed you a couple of $1 billion, and all of a sudden they're not even there. And you can do nothing. America mein company chapter 11 ho gaya, abhi aap idhar baitho. Key people leave organizations. Sometimes very, very important people leave, and on top of it, they go and join your competitor. Massive relationships change overnight because the guy changed. So you have a client, you have $5 million of an account, and now suddenly the buyer changed, and some new buyer came in, and now he wants to work with somebody else and not with you for various reasons. So sudden things will happen all the time. And scale of projects, we're building factories, we're doing ideas. So actually every single lesson will apply to everybody. I would not say that I have had near-death situations, in my business, or for that matter, even on Everest. God has been very, very kind to me. But the lessons are really the same. I mean, every single thing applies. Scale, problem, passion, issue. We do our own offsites. It's a lot of time when you really drill down. People are not passionate about what they're saying that they are passionate about. They're just saying it. There's no evidence of any sacrifice that they are actually making in order to make that passion work out. Yes, sure.
My question is about the frostbite. Your tips?
I'm sorry, about the frostbite?
Frostbite. What did you do to avoid? Because that's inevitable.
Okay, what did
right?
I do? I can tell you what specifically I did. The frostbite thing, and again, I would say that this is a lot to do with so many other situations. So when your hands or your, frostbite typically starts from the tips of your fingers on toes or fingers or ears to khair covered. So whenever there is that initial thing when you begin to feel that, it's getting really cold, my feet are going to freeze or my hands are really losing that thing. So there were specific steps, like for example, for my arms, I would do this. So the blood goes like this thing generates some heat. So even before see, it's like a kushti ka match, you don't want to let it, because beyond a point, once it pins you down to a point, then it will not let you come up. So it is about being very sensitive about, boss, ye hone wala hai, ye garbad lag raha hai. So udhar rok ke, so pair also you do, this one, and keep moving the fingers all the time. Don't let the fingers be, obviously these takes a lot of thought in your mind because you're dealing with the bloody climb, you're also trying to take pictures. somebody is crying, somebody is dying, मतलब ये सब drama भी चल रहा है. But in the meantime, I mean, there are so many other stories I didn't even share because that can take a whole night. You know, physically, people actually dying and calling out for help. So when you're going there, before that, you think, yeah, if somebody is dying and they're calling me for help, how will I just walk by? Actually, even what do you have to offer? Yes, I had that experience. There was a Kashmiri girl. I'm coming down from the summit right after the Hillary step. It's called the Cornish climb. It's a very, very tricky spot. And I'm walking, and suddenly this woman like, Aditya sir. I'm like, who is Aditya sir here? Yaar? Like, you know, yahan pe kaun hai Aditya? So this woman she's weeping. And she says that my Sherpas left and my oxygen ran out. So, but what can I do? So I just gave her some false this thing. Acha, chalo, koi baat nahi. Dheere dheere chalo. And I told my Sherpa, help her to, you know, get through the cornice and I'll carry on myself. And when we got to when we got to Camp 4, I heard an Indian woman has died. And I really thought, wohi hogi. I literally thought that it must be the same girl. But actually she made it. She was not another woman had died. And she died because she just didn't turn around. Yeah, Satish.
I have a, तो ये शेरपा अपने कंधे पे उठा के भी ले जा सकते हैं क्या?
अगर ले भी जाए तो क्या फायदा? ऐसे हेलीकॉप्टर में चले जाओ, शेरपा के कंधे पे क्यों जाना? There are flights over Everest. You can take the flights, yeah.
Can I just share something?
Yeah, why not?
I heard a guy speak. He did 6 continents, 6 marathons, 7 marathons, 7 continents.
7 summits.
And he was talking about how on day 1, I heard him speak in Mumbai. And what I'm seeing from you and him, his sharing was that the mind stops before your body can. Your body can go much further than where your mind thinks it is.
Absolutely, that's what I kept saying. It is
Yeah,
it's
so that is like, you know.
it's all here.
Exactly, it's all there.
It is completely here. And which is also, by the way, the reason why a lot of relatively older people succeed on Everest. 35 plus, 40 plus have a higher success rate. Because of it's, I mean, if it was one single word that we say, "Cha kya chahiye life mein ya udhar?" Resilience. It's about resilience. You say, okay, leave out everything else. Can you just tell me one thing that's going to make all the difference in life? It's resilience. Because no matter who you are, no matter what you are doing, life is going to kick you around. Things will keep on happening one way or the other. कितना भी safe life आपका है, whatever, even you have the most humble ambition, but still something will happen which will kick you around. And resilience is the only thing which lets you pick yourself up and, you know, take it from there. So yeah, I think we should let go of people and let them have their dinner. Enough of Everest. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. That was very inspiring. I'm sure you've inspired some people to climb the Everest, literally and figuratively. I would now like to call upon Dr. Satish Kumar to please come and present Mr. Aditya Gupta with the token of gratitude.
So Aditya Gupta, just to share, he is not only like a big adventure seeker, a very successful businessman, an entrepreneur and everything, but his nickname in our batch is Energizer Bunny. I have not seen a single person with so much energy and with so many balls in the air, and he just manages it like this. बोलता है यार क्या टेंशन है, टेंशन देने लेने का नहीं है, टेंशन देने का है, ये इसका ये मतलब ये चलता है. So I think I hope that all of you enjoyed. Of course, I am very privileged to have Aditya as one of my closest friends, and we will go to gala dinner. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.